Hey everyone, welcome to episode 4 of the recipe book challenge. This time we're going to be looking at pumpkin pancakes, a Polish soup and more. So there's lots of good stuff that ends up going into the recipe book this week. Pumpkin pancakes was my first time ever making pumpkin pancakes, so that was a new experience. Some of the recipes are from the Tesco cookbook or the Tesco magazines, so I can link them online and in the description. And then some of them were just from online recipes that I've wanted to try, so I'll link them below as well. I hope you enjoy, and I'm really grateful that you're spending this time watching my video. So I hope you enjoy it. See ya! So the first thing we're starting off making is the broccoli rice stir fry. So this is a Tesco magazine, so I'll link it down below. And the first thing we're doing is just cutting
broccoli. Give that a wash.
Washing that broccoli and cutting it into florets.
And I'll cut that into little florets. You know what, I'll probably put some baking paper down first so that it doesn't get stuck to the tray.
So if you're new here, basically what I'm doing is I'm trying out a bunch of different recipes I have saved and writing them all into a recipe book that I have from a charity shop. So initially I cut it pretty big, but then I decided to make them a little bit smaller just so it mixed in with the rice a bit better. So I just snapped them into pieces. And this is one of the recipes I had saved. And then once that's snapped into pieces, you just need to make a kind of sauce. This was a pretty simple recipe overall. And it doesn't take up much time.
Some gluten-free flour in this one. And I'll do 2 eggs in this one.
So basically it's bang bang broccoli instead of bang bang cauliflower, which is pretty common. So you just coat it in some flour and then dip it in the egg and then dip it back into the flour and then just pop it onto the tray. And you are meant to add paprika to the flour, but I forgot, so I add that later. So this is it all done and coated. And then, like I said, I forgot to add the paprika, so I add it whilst it's already in the oven. Then I just cut on some rice at the same time to cook.
Well, onto one. So you want 1 soy, 1 tablespoon, 4 tablespoons sweet chili, and 2 to 3 sriracha.
And this makes the sauce that we kind of coat the broccoli in. So this is the broccoli coming out the oven, and then you coat it in the pan, like that. And then I add some egg, which wasn't in the recipe, just for some extra proteins. And then you just add in the rice and mix it all through. So it's super simple. And top it with some spring onion. And there was that meal. Super simple.
Of my ingredients out here, so sauerkraut, an onion to chop. I'm adding garlic. That's not in the recipe, but I want to add it. A cabbage, 1 large potato, and 1 medium carrot. And then some Polish sausage. And some bacon. So I'm gonna get this. I'm gonna do the sausage and the bacon first and get that in my pot. So start with this. Let's go.
So the next recipe we look at is, I think you pronounce it kapusniak, which is a Polish cabbage and potato soup. with some sausage and bacon. It has a very smoky flavour. I decided to make this on this day because my grandmother is Polish and she unfortunately passed, and it's a meal that kind of just reminds me of growing up at her house. So I thought it would be a nice way to kind of remember those old times. So it's a super simple meal to make really. You just slice up some Polish sausage, dice up some bacon. I chose a kind of fatty bacon. You could also do a smoked bacon, that would work well. And then just add kind of the veg, and it turns out super delicious. It's a really delicious meal. And I kind of separate these pieces of bacon as I add them into the pan. I just chop them roughly into about inch pieces. I think the recipe says to do them a bit smaller, but I preferred bigger. And the only thing I would change about this recipe, which I'll change when I write it down, is I would add 2 potatoes instead of 1, just because
go clean this.
I like kind of a more potato heavy soup.
I'm gonna get this cooking. Slice this.
And one of the good things about this recipe is you can kind of cut the stuff as you've got the other bits going on in the pan. So the meat's already browning whilst I'm cutting the veg. So it saves on time. Another thing you could change about this recipe is maybe doing 2 carrots if you wanted more veg in it, or adding a leafy green. That would be really good too. Obviously there's a lot of cabbage, so you don't need more veg, but maybe if you wanted a different variety of veg and less cabbage, that would be an option too. And I just dice these relatively small.
This shredded.
So you just want a kind of smallish head of cabbage, and then just to shred that all up. It depends how much cabbage you want, because you could just do half a head of cabbage, and then, like I say, do maybe more veg of different varieties, like maybe more carrot and maybe more leafy greens if you like. But or you could do less cabbage and more sauerkraut too, because this does have sauerkraut in. So yeah, it just depends what you prefer.
Just 1 potato left.
So I had a relatively big roast pie here, but like I said, I would definitely recommend doing 2 potatoes, because it just makes it a bit more hearty and a bit more filling. But if you didn't want to do that, you could also serve it with like a nice bread, and that would work too, to make it a bit more filling. And I cut my potato into pretty big, like inch cuts, I would say. It's really all up to preference.
Then here we have a browning, which is what we want to be able to make it brown off.
So if you can't understand me there, which would make sense, I'm saying that there's some browning and we want to brown off our meat for a little bit first. After that we add in our onions and carrots.
I just cut up and added some garlic because I forgot about that. Just added in the cabbage. Okay, so I've just mixed that thing and I'll leave it for a few minutes. Just added in the sauerkraut. This is what it looks like in the pot. It smells really good.
So the sauerkraut I used was the Vadis.
It's really good.
I think sauerkraut.
Just added the rest of the ingredients. I'm just going to bring it to boil and then simmer.
And that sauerkraut was really good.
About done.
So this was the soup when it was all done. It was really delicious, and if you've never tried it, I would definitely recommend you give it a go. So the next recipe we look at is the kind of Mediterranean style potatoes. I would say it's like lemon herby potatoes. So this was super easy as well. You just chop your potatoes up, and then just add some red onion sliced, some lemon slices, and some whole garlic cloves. And then you meant to add fresh thyme at the end, but I did forget to do that. But otherwise, it turned out pretty well, and I would have it again. And then the last things we made was these pumpkin puree pancakes. So the recipe did call for making the pumpkin puree yourself, but I already had some. So I just mixed up the batter. It was a super simple mix. And then I also added some nutmeg and cinnamon. And then I just cooked them like a normal kind of American style pancake. And they turned out super great. And then I couldn't be bothered to make their yogurt, so I just had some Alpro blackberry yogurt, so I just topped mine with that. And they turned out super fluffy and delicious, really, really great pancakes. I would definitely have them again. And I did reheat one of them the next day, and that was pretty good too. So overall, a win-win. So the recipes I chose to write down in the end were the pumpkin pancakes, the Mediterranean kind of style potatoes, and the Polish cabbage and potato soup. I didn't choose to write down the broccoli rice just because I liked it, but it wasn't like outstanding to me. It wasn't something that I thought I desperately needed to write down, so I decided not to write that down in the end, because I don't think I'd really like kind of go to have it again. But it was a super simple recipe and it wasn't bad at all. And then in terms of the pumpkin pancakes, I wrote those down, but I know in England it can be a little bit hard to find pumpkin puree. So if you were looking for a shop, I would recommend trying use Waitrose because I found it there before. But if not, the recipe calls to make it yourself, so you could definitely make it yourself. But I will link all those recipes below if you want to try them. I definitely recommend giving some of them a shot. And I hope you enjoyed the video. I really appreciate you for being here, and I'll see you next time. Bye!